75 episodes ago, we took a look at DoDonPachi on the Sega Saturn. As the second in the DoDonPachi series, and a fairly early bullet hell style shooter, we came away fairly impressed even though we'd glossed over a lot of the important mechanics such as scoring in this show's early infancy. But it's a definite must-have for the Saturn or PlayStation, obviously. However, there have been several other DoDonPachi games released since then, including the 2008 arcade release DoDonPachi Dai Fukkatsu, or Great Resurrection.
DoDonPachi Dai Fukkatsu would later be ported to iOS and the Xbox 360 in 2010, with a European release from Rising Star Games titled DoDonPachi Resurrection in 2011. This particular release is fully translated and has an expanded region code, allowing for play in North American Xbox 360s, but is locked out in Japan. DoDonPachi Resurrection also maintains the series' reputation with some straight-up intense gameplay features that can really put even seasoned schmuppers to the test. Let's take a closer look.
DoDonPachi Resurrection has a fairly typical selection of 3 ships to choose from when starting the game. Type A is a red ship with concentrated forward fire, Type B is once again a green helicopter which fires shots in relation to its movement, and Type C is a blue ship with a wide shot.
Each of these fighters have one of 3 attack options as well. Bomb, which emphasizes a bomb stock, Power, which allows for either a standard or boosted and much slower moving shot type with no bomb stock, and Strong, which allows for bombs but has players set permanently in the boosted shot type with much slower movement.
The cave rules we've talked about before might just apply here more than any of the other cave games we've seen in the past, but practically make up the entirety of DoDonPachi Resurrection's gameplay. The standard 8-way movement that is constant with rapid fire and slowed with laser fire, and your typical bullet-clearing bomber attack is almost all there is to this game mechanically, with a couple of added features to spice things up in the core game. The first is being able to cancel enemy lasers with your own laser fire, which is quite a handy thing, especially later in the game.
Unlike every DoDonPachi game to come up before Resurrection, there are no power-ups in the game. Rather, there is a meter that builds up in the top right-hand corner of the screen. When full, a hyper mode can be activated, which helps in taking out bosses and huge swaths of enemies and their bullets. There is also a visual gauge around your ship, which indicates how much time you have left in hyper. Using a laser in hyper nullifies laser attacks and creates bonuses, while the rapid shot will clear away normal bullets for bonus pickups as well, which we'll get into in a second.
All of the available fire types have an auto-bomb function so long as a bomb exists in the stock. The power fire type allows for a bomb to eventually be picked up and used as a defensive buffer. But if an auto-bomb is used, it will have much less power than a standard bomb when it is purposefully launched. The bomb stock will also grow by 1 slot for each life lost to a maximum of 6. But unlike other games in this series, there is no laser burst bomb in Resurrection.
In the main game, there are also a few neat secrets as well. First off, there are the B tokens that are hidden all over the place throughout the game. These Bs are required to fulfill certain conditions in the game for advanced stages, and are uncovered with laser fire. In Novice mode, these Bs are visible regardless. There are also alternate routes that can be accessed by meeting specific requirements as well, and even feature bosses from previous DoDonPachi games.
Like any of Cave's Xbox 360 releases, there are also a couple of additional game modes available beyond the standard Xbox 360 and Novice modes. Arrange A has you taking on DoDonPachi's 5 stages with the Type A ship from the previous DoDonPachi Daiojo, or Blissful Death, in power style. A charged hyper meter will result in a hyper token being dropped from the top of the screen, much like the previous game. The more you have, the longer the hyper will last, and boosting your fire in hyper creates some of the most intense looking rapid shots of all time. Autobomb is also enabled once you grab one for your stock. This mode is one player only, but is also pretty score intensive too, so that's no surprise.
In Arrange B, things get a little weird. This is a stage-by-stage score attack that contributes to an overall score at the title screen. There are 2 gauges that fill up for either bomb or hyper use, depending on how long you press the bomber button. Auto fire is also enabled, meaning the only use for the fire button is for laser fire. Clearing specific bullets and enemies in a specific fashion results in expert tokens being dropped, which also adds to an expert gauge. Every enemy also has a rank booster attached to them, and once destroyed, will add to your rank, making things tougher.
The Bs in this mode also make things more difficult for you depending on their color, indicated by a color grid. Picking up an orange bee makes the enemy bullet swarms more dense, while a green bee will result in faster enemy shots. A flashing white bee clears the grid. If you're doing especially well though, the grid color will change to green and things just go haywire in the worst kind of way. There are unlimited lives, but death docks your score considerably.
There aren't quite as many different modes in DoDonPachi Resurrection, but since there's some really steep requirements for stuff like second loops and hidden bosses, there's more than enough gameplay here to make up for the lack of more arranged modes. One thing that is noticeably absent, however, is a low-res arcade mode.
Now, all this is fine and well, but there is one thing that needs to be said, and I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm going to be straight up with you all. DoDonPachi is a vicious little bitch of a game. It wants nothing more than to kill you constantly and mercilessly. The enemy fire here is fast and unrelenting. Paths and zones of safety are hard to make out with so many patterns crisscrossing the screen at all times. This is absolutely a game for intermediate to expert players, and even in the novice mode, it shows.
But it's also a game that has a level of gratification once you can 1cc even the novice mode.
There's also a Black Label DLC for this version, but it's region restricted only to Europe, so it couldn't be reviewed.
If you thought Mushihimesama Futari or Espgaluda 2 were too easy, DoDonPachi Resurrection is the game you want to be playing, thanks to its straight-up punishing difficulty in extreme conditions to see the true ending.
Like the core mechanics of the game, the scoring in DoDonPachi Resurrection are far from complex. As you defeat your enemies, you will start a hit counter, which is tied to a gauge that will deplete and stop the counter when it's empty. So long as you can continuously hit an enemy unit of any kind, this counter will climb, often into the thousands. This counter is a direct multiplier for the bonus pickups you'll see on the ground and drop from airborne enemies as well.
But the hit counter does more than just directly multiply a star token. Chaining enough enemies can result in an enormous bonus each time the counter goes up, which is tallied up under the main score and applied to enemy kills. If the counter falls, so too will this bonus. With a high enough counter, your score will soar in no time. But the only way to get this huge score is never to use a hyper.
To get the biggest bonuses, using hyper to clear away enemy shots is probably the easiest way to get a massive score, especially when countering large enemy lasers. Stage 3 and 4 in specific have enough room to move around to keep from being strong-armed into submission, yet the bullet patterns and enemy laser fire is nice and dense for a huge bonus conversion.
Beyond this are the B icons that are uncovered with laser fire. When they are gold, you'll get a multiplied bonus based on your hit counter and how many you've collected in the stage. When they are green though, the score is fixed to only 100 points before multipliers and also fills the hyper gauge.
But if you can collect a B token at just the right moment when it flashes white, the points attached to it are just enormous. This can be tricky to time, but there are ways around that.
The easiest way to get this heightened bonus is to reveal the B when you're right on top of it.
These scoring rules basically apply to Arrange Mode A as well, but Arrange B is a bit different. Instead of bonus drops, enemies will drop hexagonal expert items. These expert tokens are worth 10 points apiece, but can be very plentiful at times, making for a decent bonus. Getting through the stage with a high rank also allows for a large bonus when taking out the boss.
And of course, at stage end, there's a tally for all types of star pickups, your current hit counter, and a no-miss bonus if you make it through a stage without losing a life. DoDonPachi is far from technical score-wise, but it works. Extents in DoDonPachi Resurrection require huge scores, but with these scoring points in mind, can be obtained before the end of Stage 3. And of course, online score tech is also available on Xbox Live.
Cave has always had a great sense of style, and as expected, the presentation of DoDonPachi Resurrection is top-notch. Visually, it's bright, colorful, and the sprites are extremely well animated, which basically falls in line with every other Cave title we've seen so far on Xbox 360. However, they aren't quite as impressive as some of the stuff seen in DoDonPachi Dai.
The mechanical design here is fairly awesome, especially in the case of the bosses, known as the Elemental Daughters. Some of the backgrounds can get kinda lost in the chaos, but on the whole, they're sharp, detailed, and sometimes look pretty badass.
Manabu Namiki makes a return along with Azusa Chiba and Yoshimi Kudo. with what is possibly the best OST that the series has yet seen. Filled with all kinds of original greatness and even nods to other DoDonPachi games, the soundtrack here is not only spectacular but also dynamic based on what paths you take in the game.
The sound effects, once again, are great and varied with all kinds of different explosions and effects that keep the game from sounding too dull and samey. The only exception would be some of the boss's voice samples. Stage 3's boss just so happens to have the most annoying voice we've heard in a game for years. Stage 4's boss is almost as bad.
And as always, there are a number of options for screen scaling and rotation to match any monitor you may have, which is handy, of course. There are also a ton of different wallpapers to adorn your screen, and even wallpapers made for vertical monitors in specific. Nifty stuff.
In the end, despite the extreme difficulty, DoDonPachi Resurrection is just as solid as any of the series' past games, with a solid set of scoring modes and a great presentation, as expected. But how does it stack up? Let's take a look.
DoDonPachi's control often isn't quite sharp enough to match the intensity of the game's fire, but with practice, players should be able to adapt quickly.
The control here is still pretty manageable with a bit of practice.
The 360 mode is a bit too aggressive for its own good here. Spiteful might be a better word. Even the novice mode might be a bit too extreme for actual novices to defeat on one credit.
This game is mean. Even on novice, it doesn't play nice. Not for beginners.
DoDonPachi Resurrection has fewer modes available in it than both Mushihimesama, Futari, and Espgaluda 2, but the amount of time it will take players to get the true ending could be very long.
Each of the stages are just the right length to keep from feeling like a chore. The secrets add to the replay.
The sprites here are pretty great and very well animated, but they aren't quite as impressive as some of the stuff in Daiojo.
The character design is pretty tops here, with the exception of Stage 4's elemental daughter. There was just something I didn't enjoy about her design.
The OST in DoDonPachi Resurrection, though, is just unreal. There's just no better soundtrack in the series.
The soundtrack sure is catchy, but the Stage 3 boss has the most irritating, eye-rolling voice ever.
The DoDonPachi formula has lasted a long time. Most of the fundamentals are here, but the different ships and 3 different attack types made for a varied enough installment.
The enhanced hyper gauge is a step in the right direction versus Daiojo's missable hyper tokens. Arrange B is kinda weird too, but makes things vastly different in a fairly good way.
DoDonPachi Resurrection is quite good, but maybe not great thanks to its high degree of difficulty. It also has one of the most ridiculously hard condition sets for the true final boss encounter there is. But if you're looking to take your shmups to the next level, this game is the one you want. DoDonPachi Resurrection gets a 4 out of 5. DoDonPachi Resurrection has quite an attractive price point. Released in Europe as a deluxe edition for only about $45 with an arranged soundtrack CD, it can still be obtained on the cheap from various online retailers like Video Games New York, and even cheaper on eBay. If you happen to have a Japanese system though, Dai Fukkatsu has also been re-released as a Platinum Hits title for around the same price.